Let's start with a different question, different type of conversation today. And today's conversation is more along the lines of why do we really want to look good and sound great when we're on live video? We want to talk about some of those deeper reasons behind just the obvious of being in front of a camera and being confident when we're speaking to our audiences. And so, of course, we want to have a personal perspective on this, and I want you to really just give that some thought. Yes, it starts with things like confidence and connection, but goes a lot deeper than that. So just a little bit about my story. Back in 2012, when I first started my journey on looking good and sounding great on camera, it would have been great at that point if I had someone who could have just shared all the knowledge that I have today about this specific specialism. And I have a lot of knowledge around this now because I've been doing this for considerably longer than most people who are in this arena. And it's quite interesting to note that almost a decade later, that the entire world would be thrown into online only. And we had online only for schools, for many people for work, and it even went as far as things like healthcare. And we had to just make it work. We had to jump through hoops and get ourselves online and use the technology just for us to be able to continue as a space of humanity. For those who actually have leveraged this and embraced it and want to continue working remotely today, or continue working differently, shall we say today, we have the ability now to serve our clients remotely from our homes almost as well as if we were right there in front of them. And when we go live today, it is more than just about us being seen. It's about how confident and secure we feel enough during those live presentations to be our true selves. And I just recall in those days when I could only show a photo of me back in 2012, we didn't have the capacity or the bandwidth for what we do today. You know, the whole concept of broadband and having a megabit per second to be able to send data backwards and forwards, that was a dream in the distant future. And so we didn't have the ability when I first started to show myself, in fact, live on video, let alone the audience. I had to put a photograph of myself, and we used lots of slides, and we would present in a way that would allow us to just get the content out there. So forget using your mobile. That just wasn't possible back in 2012. Not saying that there weren't tools that could use it, but the tools that I was using at the time in a corporate setting, that just wasn't possible. And so every sound that I made was amplified because there was no video. Everything would come through that one channel. And yes, we could show some slides, as I mentioned before, but it wasn't anything like it is today. And so you have to think about how video can take away a little bit of the attention from everything that you say. But today it's a little bit more about getting myself on video. Most people are very happy to be heard, but less happy to be seen. And there's a certain nervousness that still is there about how people show up online today. Now, there was one good thing that I had, which was I was in a space where I was able to have an opportunity to learn how to be a certified online facilitator. That was the name of the course that helped me to first jump into this with, as they say, feet first, and get more than just my toes wet in this space. And for those of you who are of a certain vintage, you'll remember Skype. Skype for Business was the tool that we used back then, because Zoom had just been born, didn't yet reach the space where it could be offered in a corporate setting. And so we used a tool called Skype for Business. This is later, of course, translated into what Microsoft now calls Teams. But back then, that's what we had. And there were other tools, though. One of the tools that I used to use a lot was a tool called Cisco WebEx. That's a tool that's still available today. Now, let's just bring it back to some of the challenges that we face when we're thinking of this from a personal perspective, is that for most of us, we are trying to overcome that nervousness and that self-doubt about being in the online space. We certainly had to contend with that back then when we could only have our voices be heard, because then everything comes down to your voice. That's the only channel people are hearing you through. That's the only channel they experience you through. And so every breath becomes important. But today we're more worried about our message and the way we look. Most people, if you go to a Teams meeting, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, about how many people actually do show up with their cameras on. But how do we be ourselves and show up authentically? You know, what if I make a mistake is what a lot of people are worried about. What if I show the wrong slide? What if I show something that I'm not supposed to show? What if I share my screen and my emails pop up? All of these are concerns that are valid. And they're the type of things that get people really concerned about this. Now, my journey has been more than a decade, and I've learned a lot during that time, how to manage that nervousness and how to really find the ideal length of time for a presentation. And there's so much more I could say about how I can help you condense that into a simple but easy to follow system that will allow you to feel a lot more confident online. But right now, I just want you to focus on the idea of your journey. You see, right now, this is your journey. This is you getting through your own nervousness and feeling the ability to step up and serve and to feel safe in your own space, in your own presence on camera. Because let's face it, when you're sharing, you're in that space by yourself very often. Even if you're in an office and you're speaking to other people, you are still concentrated on looking into your camera, talking to your audience, trying to connect deeply with them. This ultimately is your journey. So I'd like to share some of my journey with you and to help you to take part in your journey. Now, as well as the personal perspective that we have on this, there's a emotional perspective. And this all has to do with us overcoming being live on camera, or let me put it another way, overcoming being seen on camera. Because for a lot of us, we worry about being seen, let's face it. So have you ever put yourself on camera and then felt extremely visible or too visible when you show up on video? I can take you back a little bit to when we were working through in a particular contract I was on in 2020, and the whole world was moving into just working from home. Some of you will remember this with fond memories, others not so fond. But I, at the time, was working with a large corporation, and there was around 2,000 plus people who needed to be trained to operate as a company and to be able to do that all, or for the most part, online. Now, lots of other people had this experience, of course, but I'm just going to share with you mine. And so we had to train close to 2,000 people how to use Microsoft Teams, but on Microsoft Teams. We couldn't bring them into the office to teach them how to use this new tool for them. We had to teach them how to use it on the tool. So just think about this. Those of you who went through this with your own corporations that you were working with, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But just imagine trying to show someone how to use something, but you can't show them how to use it unless they engage with the very tool they don't know how to use. And that was a lot of fun, I can assure you, teaching people how to use a software that they've never used before. And so for the novelty period, people would put on the background blur filter. And of course, those of you who know exactly what I'm talking about, there's a lot of ghosting that would take place. So lots of people were unable to put themselves on mute, or they would put themselves on mute and then start talking. All of those things we had to get through. And so for a lot of people, that's their earliest experience of being live on camera. And what began to happen very shortly after that was that people became concerned about being on camera when they perhaps didn't want to be on camera. People who were in places where they were probably relaxing and they were on camera, and they didn't want the world to know that they were relaxing when they were on camera. And so meetings became an affair where pretty much everybody would go off camera. You would start a meeting and there might be, out of 20 or 30 people, maybe around about 10 people are on camera. And then gradually, one by one, they would all go off. And then if you're the meeting host presenter, eventually you go off camera too, because everyone is feeling a bit disconnected. They're feeling like I'm just too visible. And so eventually we are all disconnected and none of us is really in the room, so to speak. And the equivalent of this would be effectively all of us turning up to a face-to-face meeting, and then we get on our mobile phones and just put our mobile phones in the room, and we all walk outside the room and we attend the meeting by all the mobile phones talking to each other. That's what it felt like. And just imagine being a person who's teaching training, which is what I was doing. And there were lots of people who just weren't visible. You're speaking now to what feels like yourself because you can't see anyone else. Now I want you to sort of start to realize how that leaves you feeling that sense of disconnection from others when we are currently living through arguably the most connected period in human history. People begin to find reasons not to show up on camera. There could be all sorts of things going on. We know people working from home, so there are all sorts of things going on. But the point I'm trying to put across here is that a lot of that baggage, a lot of that concern has crept into our day-to-day life. And so as experts and coaches, for many of us, we are now looking back at that period of time and bringing that period of time into today. And I want to help you to understand that we should really fight and strive for the ability for us to improve the way that we appear on camera. Do something about it in a positive way. Don't just hide, but be on camera so that you can be not only clearly seen, but that you can connect. Because there's profound disconnection that happens when we are all off camera. And as experts, we need to be seen. We don't want to be camouflaged and to be hidden so no one really knows who's talking, because we're giving up our authority then. So let's keep our connection with our audience by being on camera and doing what we can to improve the way that we appear. Because it's about transforming that sort of uncertainty into warmth and openness and trustworthiness so that people enjoy connecting with us live online. Now, here's the fun part. Once we have gotten through that whole sort of that personal connection that we are making with people, once we get past that concern and that worry about being visible, which is the emotional perspective, then we finally get to what is arguably the fun part. It's a creative perspective. And this is where we're using all kinds of visuals to express who we are. You see, one of the things that helped me most about being able to step into the online space, and even prior to that, when I would step into a room of people I've never met before and deliver training or teaching them, it all started with me needing to know who I am. How can I express me? Because if I don't know who I am as a person, I don't have any way of commanding that and leveraging that into my presence when I'm speaking to people. One of the best ways to do that today is when we are using our lighting as a means of augmenting our presentation, not just as a technical hack, as you might call it, but as a creative tool for expressing who we really are. But it's very difficult to do that unless you really know who you are. So a big part of this is understanding that we first become confident in who we are, then we can become confident in being on camera. Now, I needed to go further, of course, being a professional photographer and understanding lighting, I became really focused on having the best angle, the best lighting, as in lighting equipment, the best lighting, as in lighting delivery. And I went live once for about 20 minutes. In fact, I've done this more than once, where I went live to social media platforms. After 20 minutes, I reviewed the recording. No audio. My audio was absolutely silent. So I was there having a blast, talking to people, sharing great knowledge and understanding, but the audio wasn't recorded. And you can imagine I would then get into another relentless pursuit for creativity to improve the audio. And then I would end up with audio going loud, then quiet, and loud and quiet. You name it, I've experienced it. And for a lot of people, this really hurts our creativity because we don't feel like we're in control of the technical side of it. But here's the thing. I want to help you to understand that that can be managed. In fact, for most of us, that's the easy part, because as I mentioned, the knowing ourself part is the most important part, because that's what we're presenting after all to the world, is who we really are. The technical elements are stuff that we can easily get to grips with. So once we understand who we are, we can then focus on things like the color, the visuals, how we want the lighting, whether hard lighting or soft lighting, how we want to shape our visual story, which is what pulls our message together so that it feels personal. You see, this journey lets you blend the technical skills with your unique style to create what we call that authentic connection. But how can you make an authentic connection if you're not sure of who you or I am? And that's a big part of this process. And that's why I start my coaches and experts off by really digging deep into understanding themselves first, so that they can actually present from that space, so that they're not having to think too much and create too much, because they're just being themselves. And finally, after we've gone through all of those perspectives, we come finally to the professional perspective, because now I am being me, but I need to recognize that being me means I still need to come across representing my business, representing my industry, representing my expertise, and really at the end of the day, representing that best version of me that I can be when I'm showing up on camera. Now, many experts struggle with the video technical side of it, but even more struggle from the professional side of it. Let me really dig into this for a second. Without understanding the professional side of it, your message can actually fall incredibly flat. Without realizing that your presentation is a professional effort, and therefore I need to become comfortable with doing all of these presentations live on camera. I need to become comfortable with taking my complex ideas and simplifying them so that my audience can understand them. I need to build trust, and I need to share my authority with my audience in a way that's confident. That's really what the professionalism is all about. When you can say to yourself that I want my work to reflect that strength that I have gained over the many years in what I do, what I'm an expert in, my coaching expertise, I want to be able to share that confidently and from the heart. And I want to share with clarity and professionalism. That's really what we're saying. And I know that for a lot of my audience, they really want to have a simple, distilled process that they can follow, taking the complex that they take and teach to their audience. I do that for you with teaching you how to present, teaching you how to get your lighting and your audio right, teaching you how to show maybe multiple things on screen using the latest technology. Well, I show you how to do all of that. And I really want you to appreciate that this is a time like no other. But if we want to look good and sound great online, we can. If we want to look good and sound great on video, we can do that and reach our audience with connection and authority. Now, in this short presentation, I wanted to cover the personal side of it and to share with you a little bit about me and my journey so that I could move forward and be comfortable and confident sharing live online. But what about you and your journey? Where are you in your journey right now? Are you really wanting to step up and be live online, but there are things that are stopping you from doing this, such as, I'm not sure how to be competent on camera. I'm not sure how to come across with confidence on camera. I'm not sure how to get the lighting right. Well, if those are the challenges, well, let's start to work together. And in order to help you to start working on this, I've put on a presentation which is going to be in a week's time. It's going to be next Tuesday, the 18th of August. And in that presentation, I'm going to share with you a process which is nicely distilled and simplified so that you can take this on and you can use this so that your presentations live online are easier for you from now on. You're still going to have to work at it, of course, but it's going to become overall an easier process because you have a system. And for many of my coaches, they've never had a system before outside of the system that they have created for their clients. So let's work together. I'm going to put a link in the conversation below so that you can jump in and gain access. There's only going to be 100 spots available. So register, get yourself in there and book yourself onto a presentation which is going to help you to speak much more confidently in this live online era. Thank you very much for your time, for dropping in and watching this short presentation. Please give it a like, subscribe, please share, please let me know what it is that you would like to know so that I can help you to move forward. It's a pleasure to share with you, and as always, I leave you in peace. See you soon.